The Dallas Cowboys have made another big hire. We'll tell you who it is in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are discussing Darren Woodson not getting into the Hall of Fame. We'll preview Super Bowl 59. But right before we jumped on the show, Landon, the Cowboys made a big-time hire, grabbing a new offensive line coach, Conor Riley from Kansas State, their offensive coordinator. What are your thoughts on the move?
Well, I mean, again, as someone who has watched a little bit of Kansas State offensive line play recently, having to scout Connor Beebe, I was excited. I mean, I think
and Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah, Deuce Vaughn. That's true. I think you look at the way that they were able to design their run game, and obviously Deuce had incredible success as a runner. But even before that, for years they've had a very diverse and interesting kind of run game. And that's what you've gotten a lot from these sort of smaller teams in the Big 12. They're not, Kansas State's not a small team, but trying to punch up against, the teams like Texas and Oklahoma for years has made them become a more creative football team. Right now, now those teams have left for the SEC and they've become closer to the bigger dogs, but they still haven't kind of let go of that sort of creative smash mouth kind of mentality. And I think that this really kind of is a representation of that. And he was the offensive coordinator last year, but before that was the offensive line coach for, I think, like 3 or 4 years. And then previous to that was actually up in North Dakota State University, where I think he won something like 4 national titles or something.
Five in a row.
Yeah. So again, just like a guy that has had a lot of experience at the college level, designing a very interesting run play. I think John Owning tweeted out the kind of run mixture that Kansas State had been running along a similar timeline as he had tweeted out for Clayton Adams of the Cowboys. And again, a big emphasis on counters, on man blocking stuff. So lots of variety is I think what we should expect from this kind of run game. And I'm interested to see exactly how this also translates to protections as well.
I reached out to a couple people that I knew around the Kansas State program. I'm going to read you one of the messages I got when this wasn't official, but it was being talked about this morning. This is what he said. Riley is up there with the best offensive line coaches in the country. You won't see it in his press conferences where he's cool, calm, and collected. However, this guy is passionate and will rip some blank. Players love him. Cooper Beebe skipped the draft in 2023 and came back with a whole offensive line group.
That's right.
For the Big 12 title season. And Riley was a huge part of that. This would be a great hire. As a diehard Kansas State fan booster, I really hope this doesn't happen. His love for development of young kids is big. Hopefully that and the opportunities that this Kansas State has makes him come back. He also mentioned he got promoted to offensive coordinator. Wasn't always the best offensive coordinator, a little too run happy. Surprising that an offensive line coach would be a little too run heavy. But I mean, people just adore him as an offensive line coach.
Well, that bowl game, I don't know if he was the play call. I think there's some dispute there, but that bowl game that he was the offensive coordinator for, that looked pretty good. So yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting, right? They had the 11th, even without Deuce, in these last few seasons, they had the 11th, I think, ranked rushing offense last year in all of college football. So they clearly know how to scheme up a run game, and I think that's what you're looking for when you're bringing him in to be the offensive line coach and how to develop. So I love it. I mean, I think it's just to me, it's another one of these kind of problem solver coaches, right? This like a new wave coach of, instead of kind of going for some older school coaches, Schottenheimer is having us get these guys who are also football lifers, but are not afraid to kind of, change things up, mix things up, use different things to solve problems, and not just kind of ham fist the old ways and make that work a certain way. So I like guys that aren't afraid to be flexible and mix it up. And I think, based on limited research I've been able to do on him since finding this out, that's one thing that I really look forward to seeing is how does he kind of on the fly solve problems that get presented in these games.
I was looking for a connection. Like, why did the Cowboys go out and get Riley? I mean, obviously, we've got the Deuce Vaughn, Cooper Beebe connection.
Yeah.
That one's obvious.
Yeah.
You got the Trey Lance connection, right? With Trey Lance was the quarterback when he was there. But Riley actually replaced Clayton Adams as the offensive line coach at Sacramento State years and years back. So maybe that's where some of the connection comes from, Adams and Riley there. But it is interesting. I think we thought that they were going to maybe go with a assistant offensive line coach promoting, in the NFL, but to go out and get an offensive line coach who has turned Kansas State's program around. I remember watching the game against Alabama where they ran all through Alabama with a 5'6", 170-pound running back. Like, they clearly are doing some good things there. I would also mention, you go look at like the offensive linemen that they got drafted from North Dakota State over the last few years when he was there, like Dillard Dunes, Cordell Volson, who's playing for the Bengals right now. Like, he was able to develop these offensive linemen. I'm curious to see if he can do it in the NFL, but by everybody who I've talked to, they're very excited about this hire.
Yeah, and I think one thing you hear about the North Dakota State program going back a long time now is that they're about as close, especially at the FCS level, they're about as close to run as like an NFL program as you get, as far as just their focus, the way that they do things. So, yeah, obviously been able to develop several NFL players, has a lot of creativity, done a lot of great things in the run game at the college level. I'm excited to see this. And again, I just want to reiterate, I love the further commitment to the offensive line. The Cowboys easily could have signed the offensive coordinator that they did, Clayton Adams, former offensive line guy, kind of turned that over to him. They had Ramon Chinyoung still, as this assistant offensive line coach. He is still coming on as well. And then but they decided to go ahead and add another offensive line coach in there. That's a commitment to the right part of this game. And is, again, just another very extremely encouraging hire by this coaching staff so far.
Yeah, this is just so different from what we're used to seeing. I think in previous years, we'd have guys that maybe you would recognize, like Hudson Houck and some of these other names that have been around the NFL, Joe Philbin, right, for a while, or like guys that have been in the NFL forever. Now they're going out and they're getting younger guys, but it's guys that are still experienced, like Riley is. And it's encouraging. It's encouraging at least to see them trying something different when it comes to their coaching staff. That's all.
Yeah, really, really committing to it too. Like, because I mean, again, that's one of the things that we talked about is that we wanted fresh ideas injected into this. We didn't want the same old thing, and that was kind of the disheartening thing about hearing about Schottenheimer. And I don't think you can blame us for feeling that way, right? It's more of the same. The difference here is everything that's happened since then, right? All the hires they've made since then. They haven't been a bunch of Cowboys retreads. It's folks that are bringing in new ideas. I mean, well, the defensive coordinator, that's a different situation. But on the offensive side, it's guys bringing in new ideas, especially, in the run game. So
I also love that they're not just saying, hey, Brian Schottenheimer, you're working with the staff that we already had, or, well, like it seems like he's actually hiring his own staff, which is all that I asked once he was named the head coach.
These aren't Jerry guys that are being forced upon him. These are guys that somebody is at least going out interviewing. These are, folks that they are bringing in because they liked what they did on a football field, not because, they had a Johnny Walker Blue with Jerry in 1997.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about Darren Woodson, who was a star back in 1997 for the Dallas Cowboys. We'll talk about him not getting into the Hall of Fame next. This episode is brought to you by Betterhelp. What are some of your relationship green flags? We often hear about red flags that we should avoid, but what if we focus more on identifying positive signs in our relationship, those green flags? Well, if you're not sure what they look like, therapy can help you identify them, help you actively practice them, and even embody the green flag energy yourself. Whether you're dating, married, or building a relationship, therapy can help you form relationships that you'll love back. Therapy helps you develop healthy boundaries. It improves your communication skills. It empowers you to set clear expectations and express your needs in relationships. BetterHelp makes it easy by offering online therapy with over 30,000 licensed therapists to choose from. And if you need to switch therapists, you can do so at any time at no additional cost. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Later, let's talk about Darren Woodson not making the Hall of Fame last night.
Let's not, man. This has got me hot, dude. I'm sorry. Like, it's so ridiculous that he is continuing to be not put in there. I'm sorry. I should have interrupted.
No, so they went out. Only 4 players made it to the Hall of Fame last night. It would be Eric Allen, Jared Allen, Antonio Gates, and Sterling Sharp. They've made it harder to get in with some of the new voting rules. And I just wonder, like, with some of these classes coming up, like next year, where it's Drew Brees and Larry Fitzgerald and Jason Witten and Phillip Rivers, I just wonder, like, how long Woody's going to have to wait.
It's, they clearly have got to fix this system. We'll talk about another system I feel like they got to fix in the next segment, but, in another segment. This is just like, especially since, like you just mentioned, the real problem is that by only letting in a few modern football players a year, like, they are just really creating a huge backlog that is only going to get worse and worse as the years go on, right? Yeah. I think the reason this has me so hot is because, like you said, like, I feel like this was Woody's last best chance for a little while, potentially, because of all the backlog that's coming up, and you felt that way the year before too, honestly. Like, it just felt like that was his year. There was a huge push by the Cowboys to get it done. It's just absurd. Look, obviously I'm extremely biased. Woody is my favorite Cowboy maybe of all time. Like, as just like, I love Darren Woodson so much. I think he revolutionized how the position is played. I part of me has wondered, is this all part of the kind of, I don't know how to phrase this, the de-interestization of the safety position. No one cares about the safety position anymore, it feels like. But then, you see a couple years ago that John Lynch gets in. So I don't know, man. Like, I can't imagine a Hall of Fame in which Brian Dawkins, who I think is on par with Darren Woodson, and John Lynch, who I think is not even close to the same player as Darren Woodson, both being in the Hall of Fame, but the all-time leading tackler for one of the crown jewel franchises in the NFL is not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Well, it's
that's embarrassing for the Hall of Fame more than anything.
And John Lynch won 1 Super Bowl. I don't believe Brian Dawkins won a Super Bowl. I'm trying to think if he got one with Denver. I don't think he did. Darren Woodson has 3, and you can make a really good case that Darren Woodson was the best defender on all 3 of those Super Bowl teams. And I know Dion played in 95, but I think Woody was even a better player than Dion at that point. One of the things that I know is hurting Woodson, and it's no fault of his, almost every player that ends up being named on the All-Decade team gets into the Hall of Fame. He's not on the 1990 All-Decade team because, for whatever reason, they decided to put Ronnie Lott on that All-Decade team, and Lott played like 1 good year in the 90s. I think he retired after the 94 season when he was completely done. Woodson had 3 All-Pros in the decade, didn't make that team. I still don't understand why. I think if he makes the All-Decade team, he's already in the Hall of Fame.
I mean, it changed the way that the position was played, right? Like a safety that could hit like a linebacker, who could cover like a cornerback. He used to. I mean, how many safeties in the early 90s and the mid 90s did you know that were walking out and covering guys in the slot? Like,
No.
you know, and then the next play where the strong safety, where the overhang defender, again, in the 90s, when like the power run game was, you know, super prolific. So he was able to cover guys in the slot and then come down and be a punisher in the run game. Yeah, look, it's you look at the accolades, you look at the stats, you look at the actual tape. I mean, there's two guys that are his peers that are in the Hall of Fame. You cannot tell me that Woodson doesn't belong with those other two players, if not better than those other players. We can have a conversation about Dawkins. I understand he's an Eagle and all that, but we can haggle over who's better. But if one of them's in the Hall of Fame, the other one should be in the Hall of Fame. Like that, it's ridiculous. And the fact that, again, John Lynch is in there was kind of an insult to injury. And this is saying this as someone who lived in Tampa during the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Super Bowl run. I went to several Tampa Bay Bucs games. I've seen John Lynch play. I know what that's about. Darren Woodson is head and shoulders a better player than
John. And I know one of the arguments against Woodson as well, he doesn't have the interception totals. Neither did John Lynch. I think Woodson finished his career with 23 interceptions. Lynch had 26, but played like 4 more years. See, the problem is the further that we get removed from the 90s, I think the less that these voters remember how good he was, and they're just relying on stats to show, like, hey, whether the guy should be in the Hall of Fame or not. You actually have to go back and like watch these games, and frankly, I question how much some of these voters are actually watching.
I mean, we've got that problem with modern, like just this year's awards with guys clearly not watching football. So, yeah, I mean, you know, Warren Sapp played on that John Lynch.
Derek Brooks played on those teams. You know, Rondé Barber is in the Hall of Fame. I was
just thinking it was funny because Warren Sapp this morning was talking about how Micah Parsons, you know, so maybe there's an epidemic of not watching football going around. But yeah, listen, I mean, you're right. I do have a fear that this is going to be a Drew Pearson situation, or you know, a situation where it's just kind of it lingers and lingers longer than it should because of what you just said. Like, all the people that remember watching him, you know, are going to go on to do other things, or you know, some folks will start dying off, and it's just you lose a lot of the advocates and the voices that are in that Hall of Fame voting room. To kind of advocate for him as time goes on. And if you haven't watched him and you're just looking at numbers, you know, it may not seem as impressive as he truly was.
Trying to debate how much I can share here, because unfortunately, I know a little bit of how that Hall of Fame voter room works, just because of a couple of my friends. It's gotten a lot younger, the crew that's been voting in the Hall of Fame. And I'm honestly not sure if any of them even saw Darren Woodson play like at his peak. And it's just, to me, it's a disservice to the Hall of Fame to not have him in. Landon, he didn't even make the top 10 yesterday in their final 10. There's 15 finalists. He wasn't even inside the top 10. I'm worried about my guy Woody not getting in for a while, if ever.
Yeah, me too. And it's upsetting and scary. Yeah, people were complaining about Eli Manning.
My God.
Woody's got one more Super Bowl than Eli does, and he was a good player. Like, so
that's a big difference. I mean, if you're good, you should be able to get into the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
All right. Well, let's talk about something even more depressing: the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Who wins Super Bowl 59? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's just icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official partner of Super Bowl 59. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The big game is almost here, and there is no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you are cashing out. This week, I'm looking at the board and selecting more for Travis Kelce on receiving yards and more when it comes to Xavier Worthy rushing / receiving yards. Go download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup, and go check out all of the projections over on PrizePicks. Again, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. One in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, I guess we have to talk about Super Bowl 59 since we have not talked about it all week. Who do you got winning this game and why?
I plan on just hiding underneath the covers. I think all Sunday night is my plan. I'm picking Kansas City. Is
that what your harder head's telling you, by the way?
I honestly think it's both. I do think that this is the best team that Kansas City has faced in the Super Bowl. But I also think that the Eagles are not without weaknesses. I mean, I do think that there's been times during the season where I felt like they have been very beatable. And I think that despite, it not looking very good, Kansas City just doesn't lose football games. It's ridiculous. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I had just kind of lost track of their regular season record. And we were just talking. I was like, they lost 3 or 4 games, and I'm like,
they're 15-1 with Mahomes.
Yeah, they were 15-1 with Mahomes. And again, think about. I feel like I watched at least a part of every single game they played this year, right? And it's like, how many times were you watching the game where it's the, I hate to say it, it's the classic, nevertheless, it's like, how is KC and Mahomes gonna wriggle their way out of this one? There they go.
Did it again.
I do kind of feel like that's, I don't know why that would change in the Super Bowl. It hadn't changed in the last, 3 Super Bowls they played in or whatever. So, I just think that it's people are forgetting how good this Kansas City defense is, and I think that that's the element here that, there's been a lot of talk about Mahomes, and there's been a lot of talk about Philly, rightfully so, their defense and that run game. And that is an incredibly difficult combination. I just think that, the area in which this Kansas City defense really thrives lines up a lot with the area in which Jalen Hurts really does not thrive. And I do think that there is a possibility that they can make his life really difficult. But again, it all comes down to, can they stop Saquon Barkley and force them to have to throw the ball? So I
that's
think
what has me nervous, because I saw the way James Cook kind of ran all over them 2 weeks ago. That's what has me a little bit concerned in this game.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, I do think it's going to be, like I said, a closer game than, or at least a more evenly matched game than they've faced in some of these other previous games.
Yeah.
But I still think that Mahomes is Mahomes, and Spagnuolo is going to find a way to pull out some trickery at the last minute. And I still have, even in this playoff, we have watched Jalen Hurts running into sacks still. That problem didn't go away. In fact, it was just as bad, if not as bad, early on in this playoff situation. So if they can get him into a situation where it becomes a passing game, I don't think that Philadelphia is going to be able to kind of keep up in that sort of situation, because they need to rely on creating one-on-one situations for their guys outside using the running game. And if they can't do that, if it becomes a precision passing game in order to score points to win, that's Mahomes' game. Certainly not Jalen Hurts's.
Yeah. If I take off my Cowboy fan hat and put on my like actual analyst, like I get paid at 33rd team to be, everything like lines up for this to be a game where Philadelphia wins. They control the clock. They jump on them early, and Mahomes and the Chiefs are playing catch up the rest of the game. I just think Philadelphia has the more talented roster. But when you look at like Andy Reid's career record, not only with the Chiefs, but like career record when he has 2 weeks to prepare for a game, it's like unbelievable. And Spagnuolo, when he gets a couple weeks to get ready for an opponent, especially one that he already knows, like he's just going to come up with the most diabolical blitzes that you've ever seen in big moments of the game. That's why I have a hard time picking against them.
Well, and I think the other thing too is that you just mentioned it. Like I think the key thing for Philly to win is they get up a score early, they get out of the lead early. But that's never been Philly. Not at any point at all during the season has that been Philly. And on top of that, they've been off for 2 weeks. So, it's always going to be kind of a slow start with these situations. And if anyone's going to start slow, I think it's much more likely to be Philly than Kansas City, because Kansas City.
Although Philly's been better in the playoffs. I mean, they got up to a huge lead against the Rams. They did get up to a big one against Washington, but
that's fair. But it's just not something I would say that is part of their identity necessarily. So, and I think it's what's caused them problems at different points in the year, is because you're right. That is the best way for them to win these games, because of their run game, because of their defense. But that isn't necessarily how that's played out for most of the season.
My guess, if I had to imagine what Andy Reid is going to try to do, he's going to try to put together these long drives of like a lot of early down passes to like Travis Kelce, where it's like, hey, we'll take 5 yards on 1st down and 10 and just get us into second manageable and try to just chew up as much clock that way. And frankly, that's just the way they've been playing all year, because they don't have the weapons on offense. Yeah. They've been playing more of this ball control style of offense, and they don't put up big numbers. But man, that's why so many of these games end up being 20-19, 21-17, is because they can just control the ball and play keep away better than almost any team in the league. And I think against Vic Fangio's defense, is even as talented as they are, that's kind of what Fangio allows you to do, is like, hey, if you want to try to nickel and dime us all the way down the field, we're eventually going to stop you in the red zone. Maybe they will, maybe they won't.
Yeah.
I'm still picking the Eagles, because I think the Eagles they have an overwhelming amount of talent, but I won't be surprised at all if the Chiefs win this game.
I mean, you're 100%. I agree with all of your analysis, except the problem is that the personality of these two teams aren't going to allow for, like you just said it, right? The thing that makes the Fangio defense so infuriating to play against is that he's not going to let you beat him deep. He's going to make you nickel and dime him. And who is he facing this week? The king of nickel and dimes.
I know.
The king of nickel and dimes, right? Like, so it is kind of a matchup that in a lot of ways, like, this formula works on a lot of teams, but again, the Chiefs are not a lot of teams. Like, they're the two-time Super Bowl winners who have found ways to win in every single manner. Like, it doesn't matter the game script. The Mahomes-led Chiefs have a way to win that game, right? So I think they've lost a couple of those like paths this year. It feels like they're not as good at throwing the ball deep necessarily. Maybe they're not as good at, a running attack as they had been previously, especially because they've had to deal with injuries and stuff. But in this specific game script, like having to throw against a shell and be accurate over and over again and complete first downs and use your legs to create different angles that aren't there. I mean, who's better in history than Kelce and Mahomes at beating that kind of thing?
I hope you're right. That's all I got to say. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy Super Bowl 59. And we'll see you right back here on Monday.